Hey guys, Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, Drew Cook here with Bass Resource, and we're talking about wintertime worm techniques. Throwing a worm in the wintertime, you know, a lot of people aren't on the water. It's a great time to be out there. There's a lot of people, you know, they're in the deer woods. They're cold, you know, in the house. Don't want to be outside. It's one of those times that you can catch some really big fish. And not have to compete against a lot of people on the lake. You know, but it's also something to think about when it's cold. You know, everything slows down. You know, you're not catching them. You know, moving fast. You know, you gotta really hunker down and fish slow to be able to get bites. In the wintertime, this is the only bait caster that I throw on a worm in the wintertime. This is a Carolina rig. I've got 20-pound sunline shooter, main line, and coming to my weight here. Good thing about a Carolina rig. Coming to my weight, I have a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight. I like the tungsten because you can just feel things a lot better. You don't have to have it. No, I used a giant lead weight for my whole life, really, and you know until they started, you know, giving us tungsten. But I have a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight and 2 beads, and these beads are there for, you know, protecting your knot from this big weight that's hunking around, but it's also there to make a sound. So whenever you're hopping this thing over, you know, a limb or a brush pile or, you know, stump or a little bit of grass, those things are clicking. And for years I've been told it sounds like a crawfish, but I just think it's something to get their attention. You know, they're getting over there and looking at it. And from there you have a big spro swivel to my leader. So my leader, you want it smaller than your main line. So whenever you get your bait hung on something and you pull it and break it off, you still have your weight and your swivel and stuff, because when you break this whole thing off, it's an ordeal to tie it back together. You know, you got 3 knots, you got to get leader line out, and, you know, do all this. So you want to make sure it's smaller. So I have 14-pound sniper going to a 4/0 Gamakatsu hybrid worm hook with a 5-inch trick stick on here. This one's in tilapia, and that's, you know, pretty much my go-to whenever I'm throwing a Carolina rig with a trick stick on it. Is going to be, you know, that green pumpkin base. I really like this color because it's got a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple in it. You know, I will throw, you know, a darker color whenever the watercolor's a little darker. You know, throw a hematoma or a black and blue. But this is, you know, this is the perfect example of not having a whole lot of action, but that's what gets bit. You know, you're just dragging this weight along and your bait just kind of glides over here and falls down. You know, you pull it again, it just glides over here. So nothing crazy. There's not a whole lot of, you know, there's no tail on here. There's no action. No, you know, it's just gliding and falling. That's what's getting the bites. Next is going to be a Ned Rig. This is kind of where the Ned Rig started, was wintertime, and this is actually a bait that I designed for big bite. That is, it's a crawl to start with, but it was made to pinch off and use as a Ned Rig. You can see here, you know, this is how it starts, but you just pinch these legs off to use as a Ned Rig. But I've got that on a 3/16 ram head from Big Bite. This is their Ned head. You know, I got 7-pound Sunline Sniper to 12-pound Sunline SX braid, and I'm throwing this on the Dobbins Ecstasy 753. So you ask, well, man, it's a big rod. You know, you don't need all that. Well, you don't need it, but better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, in my opinion. You know, just to be able to throw it a little bit further, be able to hook them, because a lot of times when you're throwing this Ned Rig in the wintertime, you know, you're fishing pretty deep. Like, I'm gonna use a Lake Hartwell as an example, or Lanier. You know, really clear reservoirs. Those, you're catching them in like 30 foot, you know, 30 foot, 35 foot. That's a long way down. So you make a long cast, and you know, your bait hits the water, and then you feed it line to sink, and 30 foot down, you know, you've got a whole lot of ground to play with whenever you're trying to hook one of these fish. And this is great around rock. It's great around, you know, obviously not wood, but great around docks. You know, just throwing this thing around docks, around rock, and you know, riprap or anything like that. Bridges, any blow throughs, you know, that this is a great bait to fish there, and that's a place where a lot of fish are going to congregate in the wintertime. You know, any of those bridges that are, you know, in those creeks, because fish are wintering, you know, back there, and they're going to move around to, you know, start thinking about spawning and getting ready. That happens way before a lot of people give them credit. You know, they're always thinking about eating and spawning. And last but certainly not least is the drop shot. This is my kind of go-to drop shot, especially in the wintertime. You got to have you know, a drop shot rigged up, because if you're throwing the Ned and you look under the boat and there's a fish on the graph, it'd take you a minute to get that Ned down there to him. It doesn't take near as long whenever you have this drop shot, so you're dropping it straight down on them. And in the wintertime, it's pretty much exclusively me dropping on fish with a drop shot. I'm not really casting it much anymore. I'm actually finding the fish, dropping it down to them to keep it in front of their face to be able to get those fish to bite, because they don't want to move, they don't want to chase it, and they want it to be like right in front of them. On my drop shot, this is a big bite cliffhanger worm. This is also in tilapia. Like I said, you can't go wrong with a green pumpkin base. This is a #1 heavy cover finesse worm hook. I've got a 5/16 tungsten, 7-pound Sunline Sniper to a 12-pound Sunline SX braid, and this is on a 723 Dobbins Ecstasy. It's a rod that I like for drop shot, and it's not too long, not too short. You know, you can still get them around the boat pretty good. And you know, one thing to note about wintertime fishing is their mouths are a lot harder that time of year. So you've got to keep that in mind whenever, you know, you're fishing for these things. You tend to lose a lot in the wintertime because their mouth's so hard, but if you just keep constant pressure on them and, you know, maybe tighten the drag up a little bit more, then you'll be fine. But those are my go-to worms for the wintertime.